just go through the bill. Why do you feel that this bill is necessary?
Well, there are a small number of sheriffs in our state who, since December of 2018, have decided that they're no longer going to cooperate with federal immigration authorities. And the result of that has been folks who should not be let out on the streets are being let out. And so here at the General Assembly, we're trying to put a stop to that.
And I understand that there is another version, an edited version, I guess, of the bill, updated version. What are the main differences from what we saw here?
Well, we've worked closely with the North Carolina Sheriff's Association to come to a bill that they can endorse, and they have endorsed the new version of the bill. And the bill still requires sheriffs to cooperate with ICE. It requires sheriffs to comply with ICE detainers. Now the bill will require a judicial official to order that to be done in pretrial conditions of release if an individual has an ICE detainer issued against them by the federal government. Also, the penalty under this bill, if a sheriff fails to cooperate with ICE, if they fail to comply with the detainer request, the sheriff can be removed from office.
And, you know, some activists are saying that this could perhaps lead to law enforcement that's pulling people over to check their immigration status, that kind of thing, and they are opposed to that. What would you say to those activists who say that this is going to lead to maybe people being pulled over for no reason other than to check their immigration status?
I would say they need to read the bill, because under this bill, it only applies to people who have already been charged with a crime in North Carolina. It doesn't say that officers can go out and look for somebody who might be an illegal immigrant. It simply says if you're charged with a crime in North Carolina and you're in the jail, the sheriff's got you in the jail, then they have to cooperate with ICE under those circumstances. And that's what most sheriffs have been doing in North Carolina for many years. It's only until recently, until December of 2018, when, again, a small number of sheriffs who were simply putting partisan politics ahead of the public safety of their constituents decided that they were no longer going to cooperate with ICE if this issue even arose.
And there have been some law enforcement agencies here in the area that have said that when they have to do this kind of work, they're saying that it adds more to their job to be doing immigration enforcement. What would you say to those law enforcement agencies who say that?
Well, they're not really doing immigration enforcement under this bill. Again, these are folks who they have already arrested for some violation of state law. And again, this is something that nearly all sheriffs in North Carolina had already been doing. They've been doing it voluntarily. And so before, this bill wasn't necessary, because a sheriff's job is to protect the community. And most sheriffs want to do that. But unfortunately, a small number of sheriffs recently have decided they don't want to cooperate with ICE, and that's why we have to move forward with this bill.
And I did see something in here that says that it would not affect witnesses or people who may be in the country illegally who are maybe reporting a crime or something. So for those who say that it might deter undocumented immigrants from reporting crimes or being witnesses, what would you have to say to that?
Well, you know, under the current law and what sheriffs are already doing right now, this bill only applies, period, to folks who have been charged with crimes. Really no difference in terms of what most sheriffs are doing right now and what's in the bill. It's just that small number of sheriffs who are going to be required to do what most of the other sheriffs in our state are already doing. And it has nothing to do with victims. It's only about folks who are charged with a crime in North Carolina.
Would you say that this bill is in response to, or I guess, I don't even know if in response is the correct way to put it, but because of the recent raids that we've been seeing here in North Carolina as well?
Well, ICE has a job to do, and their job is to enforce and uphold federal immigration law, and they're going to do that. Previously, the way they did that was in our jails. So our sheriffs, when they would arrest somebody and they had someone in jail, they would take them to the jail, and they would notify ICE if they couldn't determine citizenship. And then if ICE had a detainer and they wanted to execute on that detainer, they would go do that in the jail, in the confines of a jail where everyone can be kept safe and they're not out on the street trying to execute a warrant. Unfortunately, the small number of sheriffs have decided they no longer want to do that now. And so what ICE is having to do is go out in the street and enforce federal immigration law. They would prefer to do it in the jail. That way they're catching the worst of the worst. They're catching folks who are here illegally and also committing crimes in North Carolina.
For those law enforcement agencies that are not doing this right now, would you say that this is going to be something easy that they could implement if this does pass?
Absolutely, because their predecessors were already doing it. Again, the overwhelming majority of sheriffs in North Carolina, we think probably at least 90 sheriffs in North Carolina are already cooperating with ICE, already honoring ICE detainers. Again, it's just a small number who are not doing it. Most of their predecessors were doing it, and so it shouldn't be a burdensome thing to implement at all, because again, it's been the common practice in North Carolina for many years.
Anything else that you think is important?
Well, I think it's important to look at some of the examples that ICE has given us of folks who have been charged with serious felony offenses, especially in Mecklenburg County. And those folks have had ICE detainers issued against them, and yet the sheriff in those counties have let those folks walk out of the jail when they didn't have to do that. They could have honored ICE detainers like most sheriffs in North Carolina have done for years. And so some of those folks have actually gone out and committed additional serious offenses, additional felonies, and it's just unnecessary. The sheriff's job is to keep the public safe. And if these sheriffs in some of these counties refuse to do that, we here at the General Assembly are going to make sure that those communities are kept safe.
Thank you very much.
Actually, one question about, you mentioned that they would be removed from office. That sounds a little bit counterintuitive to basically what the Republicans are always for lesser and smaller government. These are elected by the people of a small area. They want this person to be there. Now you are telling them, no, you are not able to have them. How is that can kind of go along with the fact that they were elected by their constituents, yet you're telling them, no, you can't have that person?
Well, conservatives are for small government, and small government's not the same thing as local government, first of all. And second, when these folks are released out of a jail that way, you can't guarantee that they're going to stay in that given county. And so if folks in one given county, if they want their sheriff to release criminals out on the street, they can't guarantee, though, that those folks are going to stay there. They might come to my county or your county or a surrounding county. And that's why we're just trying to put in place what the practice of most sheriffs in North Carolina has been for many, many years, by requiring them to cooperate with federal immigration authorities. And that's what law enforcement really does. They communicate with each other. They work across district lines to keep our communities safe.
But what about the constituents that they elected that person?
Yeah. Well, again, you can't guarantee that somebody who they release is going to stay in that community, and that they're not. I mean, they're crossing county lines. These are folks who obviously don't respect national boundaries. How can we expect them to respect county boundaries? In addition to that, some of these sheriffs campaigned on ending 287G. This bill has nothing at all to do with 287G. This is an extreme position that these sheriffs have taken to simply say they're absolutely not going to cooperate with ICE. And in many cases, they won't even communicate with ICE. They won't pick up the phone when ICE tries to contact them. That's an extreme position that puts the public at risk, and it needs to stop.
Okay, I think we're all set. Thank you.
All right, thank y'all.
All right.